first thing I always ask is, where were you born and raised, Mayra?
Okay, well, I was born in Mexico City, in a hospital that fell down during the 1985 earthquake in Mexico City. And that hospital doesn't exist. Well, the original obviously had to be demolished and built again, but that's where I was born. And funnily enough, now there's a new whole hospital in that area, which appears in a film called Roma. I don't know if you have seen Roma, but it's set up in 1970, 71. Exactly at the same time where I was, oh, I just said my age.
That's okay.
When I was born.
I can take it out, so don't worry.
Okay, it doesn't matter. No, but yes, I grew up actually in that area, and what it's called the Roma district of Mexico City, and that's why the film is called Roma, because of the district where it was set up. So yes, I was born there. I grew up in one of the largest cities in the world, and it was quite an extraordinary time now, thinking back, you know, how it came to be now living in a place where, I mean, the population, it's not as wide. I mean, I know that Dundee is a city, but it has no comparison to what Mexico City is. So yes, it is quite interesting to look back and think the contrast in my life.
I watched the film Roma.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. It got a couple of Oscars.
Yes.
It looks like, I mean, now I can see, like, I mean, I think you kind of mentioned about your dad was a judge, isn't it?
No, he was a solicitor. He was a lawyer, and he's retired now. But he used to work, and he specialized in criminal law. So he worked in jails in Mexico at some point. But in the 80s, when things started to become quite dangerous, and that line of work, he moved to corporate law, and he started working for banks. But also, in the time when he moved there, the banks were nationalized in Mexico. And so he lived in a very exciting time to be working in banks and corporate law. And but yes, my childhood, in some respect, I spent some Christmases when my dad was on call, because he was the second in command in one of the jails in Mexico. So I spent some Christmases and birthdays sometimes in jail, because my dad was on call, and we would go and visit him. You know, that was, family is still in Mexico quite a strong union. You know, we still believe that spending time with our nucleus of family is important. So my mom made sure that we would spend time with dad, even if it meant that we would have to spend some time in jail. But I'm talking about late 70s, when things weren't what they are now, you know, and when a big movement of trying to make those places a place that would enable people to get trained in areas of when they were released from prison, they would be able to have a skill that they could offer back to society. So, it was like a small city. They had a bakery, they had theater, they had a little farm, they had all these things. So it was a very interesting time. Unfortunately, as we well know, there is a power in my country that's taken over, and it's taken over every single aspect of society. And sadly, it would take, I think, a long time before that's eradicated. And that's what it's known as narco power. So, yeah.
I mean, I really want to like dig a bit about your childhood memories.
Oh, okay.
So like if I compare with the film like Roma, it's like, middle class film, like middle class family, like a couple of children. Do you have got a big family, like lots of siblings?
No. Actually, and I wouldn't consider myself, what at the time in the 1970s with the film Middle Class, this family had someone to, they had help, and both my parents, they come from the countryside, a state called Oaxaca. My dad comes from an indigenous group called Zapotecs, and his family back there in Oaxaca, they still speak the language, which unfortunately I don't, and it's something that in the future I would like to rectify. I just need the time to learn. And perhaps this week, actually, it's something that I've been exploring. So my parents came from very humble backgrounds, and they moved to Mexico City. So they were immigrants, and they went there in search for work. They met there. They were from the same state, but not from the same place. My dad was from what it's a town near the Pacific Ocean, and my mom was a city gal. So and they met in Mexico City, and yes, as I said, we live in that district called Roma, and was very well, it was hard working for both of them, for both of them to start from really nothing and build up. And I guess I come there. They have been my example, and in the way that I have conducted myself. That no one gives you anything for free. You have to work for it. And I don't feel entitled, you have to work for it. And I think that's one of the things that I treasure and I go by, that the ethos of hard work. And yes, that area in Mexico City, you have to picture that at the moment there's 22 million people living there, and when you fly into Mexico City, you go in the plane and you see, and in the evening you see lights and lights and lights, and the airplane is descending and all you can see is lights. So if you can imagine that, it's like huge monster of concrete, that unfortunately it is, all the green areas were taken over, and now there is a big worry about what have we done, and there are more programs to make green areas in Mexico City. And so, yes, it was an interesting time. Obviously, I was just very little to know what was really happening in the country. You have to historically think of 1968, when there was the killing of students in Mexico City just before the Olympic Games. At the same time, what was happening in the US as well. And actually there was a stand up by some African American athletes in that 68 games and in Mexico City. So all those things were happening. Obviously, I was just a very small child. I wasn't born in 68. I was born later. But also at that time, there was movements from students and society as a whole, was in turmoil, and there was a very severe repression from the government at the time. And in 71, where that film is based, we have what we call Los Halcones. That was a paramilitary group, that tried to cause disruption and actual violence and blame the students for it. So I think for me, when I watched that film, Roma, it was like, my mom, I pictured my mom working in the same hospital where the father worked. My mom was working there too because she was a head nurse. Well, at the time she wasn't, she was a nurse, but later on she became a head nurse. And so, yes, it's lots of memories. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, before the pandemic started, I had to fly to Mexico because my father was not well, and he was actually in that hospital, and I took a picture of myself with the sign of Roma behind me in that hospital because I thought, yes, it was like traveling in time to think that so many decades before I was born there and what happened there. So it was, and also having my father at the time in a hospital, it was just a time for reflection, I think. It was a worrying time, but a time for reflection. And it did happen just before the pandemic took off.
So like we touched a bit about your parents, their ethos about life, which like more or less, formed your understanding about the world. Like, I mean, then if we move on, then obviously you went to school. Can you give us some of your memories from your school?
From
Any
school.
good, bad, anything you think that, oh my God.
Yes. Well, I was very fortunate to have a good education, and I can say that my parents worked really, really hard to provide us with a very good education. And so I went to private school, which there are many levels of private school in Mexico, but what meant for me is that, for example, I was able to learn English from an early age, which I may not be demonstrated, but yes, I did. And so we wore uniforms. There are other places where children don't, but we did wear uniforms. And I can picture myself. I actually have a photo of me in primary school, and I had this haircut that looks like Dora the Explorer. And I did look, I am the original. And so those, they were really nice memories. I remember learning to read at school, and learning to speak English too, and to swim. Those are early memories, and something that we used to have at school, what they called mini Olympic Games, and I do remember that. I don't remember what I did. I must have done something, but I don't remember. But I do remember having the podium and people going up, and so I do remember that. And also the fact that, and now it just thinking about it makes me cringe. But the 12th of October, they used to celebrate or reenact the arrival of Christopher Columbus to the Americas, you know, and we knew that story inside out, you know, in the sense, the story that was told to us, you know, and we knew the name of the 3 ships that arrived. We knew who shouted land, land, and, you know, so all that, but now makes me cringe, you know. Why, as children, we were made to reenact something that and celebrate something that, in a way, I am so critical about, you know, and what came thereafter. So, yeah, that's one of my memories of being a little girl in Mexico.
So, like, did you go to this? Like, did you stay in the same school when you like growing up? You know, when you go to like proper school.
Yeah, no, I moved schools. I was in one school called Cali, and the Aztec language now it means house, Cali, and I went there until the age of 10, so primary 5 in Mexico, and then I moved to another school. To a Catholic school. And I have some stories there. And in that school, it was run by Benedict monks. So yes, there were a few stories about that. But the academic level in that school was so much higher. So they pushed children. They push children to no end, and which, you know, when I moved to the UK and people said, "Oh, Scotland has the best education and one of the best educations in the world," I thought, well, I remember reading Dante, for example, you know. I remember in primary school reading about health education in English, you know, and things like that. And then I compare how I saw things were run here, and I thought we were pushed really hard. I think we were pushed. The amounts of homework that we used to take home was unbelievable. It was so much, but it was an investment, and it was, in my opinion, now looking back, it was worth it.
Were there any particular teachers you thought that
they had
impact?
Well, good and bad.
Tell us both.
Yeah, in my first primary school, I had a really, really nice teacher called Professor Posas, and I think he was primary 1, and I dearly remember him. He was like he was an older man at the time, actually, when he was teaching us, and I do remember him fondly, and I have pictures in my head of him teaching us, and I was only 5. But then in the other school, I also had really, really good teachers. But I remember one of the teachers that I think she wanted to be a nun, or she was a nun, or something was behind it, and she was very strict. And that didn't sit, not because I was you know, a child that wouldn't do homework, but I think now that I am a teacher, I understand that you cannot behave like that, you know. And they were very, very severe and very, I don't know, there was something, we were terrified. I can tell you that much. And I think that I don't take very well. I think people have to be kind.
No, like that's my memory as well. Like, you know, both my primary school and, you know, the high school. It's like good, bad memories. They're like very, very kind teachers, and also they are very, very strict, and they're very, quite willing to, you know, execute those power. And in our time, like the caning, like beating us up were very common.
So at the time you went to school, you had physical punishment, because by the time I went to school, that had been eradicated. I know that it didn't happen. I mean, my parents tell me stories about that. And also one of my cousins that went to the same school, the second one, the Catholic one, there was physical punishment. And now that I remember, one of the punishment that when I was there that was still physical, and I don't know why I didn't remember now that you mention, when boys, but it was just directed to boys. When boys misbehave, they would shave them.
No.
It just came when we were talking about physical punishment.
Oh my God.
Yes. And that's why I don't remember it, because it wouldn't happen to me because I was a girl. So yes, that used to happen. But I know that earlier on there were severe punishment before that. And I don't know how parents didn't complain.
I mean, they were happy.
Or maybe they did, but I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
I mean, the stricter the school was, I mean, the parents were happy, because, their children are under good control, they're learning lots of good discipline.
Yeah, some cultures still accept that, and there are places like Singapore where the parents still want their children to be punished in order to keep them online. I am aware of that, but I don't think that's the right thing to do.
I mean, part of my story is then, when I grew up, I became more conscious about these things, the power relations. And now I actually totally understand that power is always inherently corrupt. And then more or less, you cannot justify any power.
No.
Most of the power, if you look at the historical power, the colonial power, or any kind of power, you can see there is no justification about that. And the more you understand them, so over the years, historically, they try to make excuses for those power. But now, we can see the whole thing is just.
Well, and coming to that point, I remember that in that school, and we have to see the context. It was a private school where kids that attended there were likely to be part of that layer of power in my country, and that's what it was embedded in the teaching. I remember some of the priests telling us that we were going to be the future of the country, and that we were going to be that layer of power. Which now, I mean, you were a child then, and what did you know? But in reflection, you can understand what was happening. And indeed, many of those kids that are grown-ups now are in that layer of power. And yes, it is scary. It's like they are making sure that circle is going to be tight and close, and it's going to not allow others to join that circle, and it's a self-protection measurement.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I can see the similarity because I was growing up in Bangladesh, like first 25 years of my life, and if I go try to remember what was happening during my time, if you see all the best schools and the best colleges in Bangladesh or in the capital city were actually all run by all those missionaries, like Catholic, all those groups. they still are,
Yeah. Yeah. But funnily enough, in the Mexican Constitution, there's an article that says that education in the country should be no religious, So, and that's in the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, and in those private schools, most of them, not all of them, but they are run by some sort of Catholic influence. I know that the Vatican runs private universities in Mexico and schools. Obviously that's where it comes from. But at some point, we thought. I think the history of my country is so interesting, but we fought against precisely that. There was a point where we wanted to break, much later after independence. We wanted to break the power of the church that was still there, and they were constant conflict later on where they wanted to divide that power. But it's still there, still there. And you know that it is a very strong Catholic country, Mexico. So yeah. And one has to be very careful too. That's all I can say.
Subsequently I teach politics, and then some of the things I teach is this post-colonial stuff. Now I can see what was going on there. So it's not like these missionary schools were promoting Christianity or not. It's not. So we are talking about 80s, 90s. But what it did, it's not innocent, because it's it was giving us a picture that who are good and who are bad, which system is good and which system is bad. Discipline is good, and then if you're not disciplined, then it's bad. So it's creating this kind of knowledge, powerful knowledge.
Yeah, and the guilt, because I had the opportunity to work at some point here in a Catholic school, high school, and I spoke to someone there, one of the teachers, and I was saying that in Mexico, children are taught that you are guilty since the moment you're born. That's the original sin, and so you're guilty all your life, and the ethos that I saw here was completely different, and I was very surprised. It was I was pleasantly surprised that was not the idea, at least what I saw. That was my experience. But yes, it's you have to make sure that you wash away your sinful life.
No, I think we are going too much deep stuff, so I'm just trying to
that's right,
lighten this up as well. What kind of year we are talking about? For my example, first 25 years in Bangladesh and the rest is West.
I have lived in this country, it's going to be 27 years now, and so more
can you say
of my life here. Yeah, I have passed the 50-50 and so I've been longer here than there. And yes, I'm talking about that kind of education was earlier on in my life. It was in the 80s. then I went to university in a public university, which I thank myself very much for doing so, because it opened my eyes in many, many respects. You have to think that for a large part of my life, I was going to the schools where, kids had, privileged backgrounds, many of them. And then I go to public university as a young person, where I can see that the young people that were there, many of them were working, and they had to work in order to be able to live, and it was hard to get to university because we were 5,000 applicants that did a very long exam to get into public university. It was more than 2 hours exam. It was longer than 2 hours. And then you have to look at the results in the paper, find out if your name was there. And from those 5,000 applicants to study law that year, only 400 were accepted. So, and I was very fortunate to be in those 400, because I don't know what I have done, if I would have done if I wasn't accepted. And that was really good. I really enjoyed. I mean, many of my teachers, my lecturers were people that I remember having one that was Uruguayan that had run away from, he was living in exile really, from the dictatorship there. And also many of them used to spend their time off in Cuba. So you can imagine, I had to study Karl Marx and the Capital in my first year at university. so you can imagine the contrast, which is great. It was really, really good. To me, that was my education. I had a solid academic background, but that didn't compare to what I learned later on.
I mean, that's one thing. It's quite similar in Bangladesh, that the public universities are, exceptionally good. I mean, as good as like here.
Oh yeah.
But
my lecturers are good.
To get in, is like so competitive, and then very, 1% of the population kind of have the opportunity to get in.
Yeah. And to finish, because very little are able to finish.
And I think like one of the, I'm not sure like about Mexico situation, in like Bangladesh, these public universities are funded by the states.
Yeah.
So, I never saw our, professors or lecturers were on a strike, like demanding their pension or like demanding.
They weren't. Oh no. And in Mexico they were. And the strikes are completely different to what happens here. When and the union calls for a strike, they go on, they start, and they don't finish until the issues are resolved.
Yeah.
So many kids in the generation below me, for example, there was months and months of strike in the university I attended, and they missed out, they did miss out. I was fortunate that I think in my time there maybe were 1 or 2 strikes, but yes, the universities are heavily state funded, and we only paid a very small fee. Let's say that in my whole 4 years of my law degree, I paid £10, but that's too much. So yes, it's where the money comes from, and yes, many of my lecturers, that was their second job. You know, they did it because they believed and educated. I mean, many of them even either work in private universities and went to the public one too, or they had one of them was a procurator fiscal. We had really, you know, the personalities we had in that university were great, and but yes, I mean, it would have been very difficult to just get the one salary. I remember one of my property law lecturers, he had 3 public universities jobs. So he would travel the whole city from one end to the other and then the other. So I think it's love to the job.
Yeah. No, I mean, it kind of makes sense because, I mean, I mean, our teachers went on a strike, but for different reasons, not for, pay or like, pension. They went for a strike for political reasons. Something is happening in the country. And they took a stand that, that's not right.
Yeah.
They're always the voices for, like justice and equality.
Yeah.
So if I see my country's history, like in 1971, when there was a war between, Pakistan and Bangladesh, the Pakistani army, the first thing they did, so the war started on the 25th of March, 1971. First thing they did, they went to the universities and killed all those teachers.
Because they knew they were going to stand.
So that's the conscience of we still, like remember, there's a special Remembrance Day for those, the killings of the intellectuals of the country.
And I think in a way, that's why when it was my time to go to university, that was not the case, because that happened in 1968 and in the early 1970s, when the government in Mexico came down really hard and trying to cut that from what was happening in my country. And that's why when later on, they were not going to take those stands. Not that I'm saying that they didn't, they did it in their own way, I guess. But when the army is brought to a university, I think that's when the dialogue is lost.
No, I mean, I went to university in the early 90s, and I still remember. I mean, it's kind of one of my best memories. I talked to my students as well, because there were days where, because the whole university, the whole students community, that the teachers community rose up against this dictator. Okay. And lots of students lost their lives as well. Even a teacher lost their life, but at the end, we got rid of that army general dictator. And I still remember, I think 2-3 weeks in Bangladesh, there's no government there. There's no police force there. There's no army there. Everyone, went to their barrack. And people think that, the human beings are, selfish, nasty, brutal. If you give them chance, if there's no law and order, people will just try to attack each other. Those 3 weeks were the best memories of my life. We all were on the streets, and there lots of music, lots of, street theater. And there are no single party there. All were, helping each other.
Yeah.
It's like kind of, ideal, the community, the society I saw. So that's why, I tell my students that I have hope, really hope in the humanity. We actually are good.
Yeah, and I believe that. After the Brexit referendum, I remember and finding the outcome. I remember in that first class I gave after that, I said to my students, look, we cannot worry about this, because I trust that you are the future, and you are going to be the ones that are going to sort out all this, and I trust you. You know, because yeah, I mean, as you say, it's trying to inform and get younger generations to be aware of what's happening. And I mean, we know that at the moment there's a lot of turmoil, but there are younger people there that will make a difference. And as you say, it's always good to be hopeful in that, because yeah, human beings are, our nature cannot be destructive, you know. There's goodness in us, in all of us, so we have to hope that is going to be positive.
I mean, it's like one of those memories that stick in your brain, and then say that, you know, because we are not worried about, you know, oh my God, there's no law and order, you know, like our houses will be destroyed, you know, our properties will be destroyed, you know, our lives will be destroyed. We never thought about those things at all, you know. Those are the happiest couple of days of our lives. And then obviously the new government came along, you know, and initially the government was good, and then eventually then, you know, it became again the same story. So the power, did you see the power actually, you know, divided us, also divide us. It's not the people, you know. So the power told us that, you know, these are bad people and these are good people.
And that's unfortunate, Abdullah. And you can see that with the rise of populism. And unfortunately, that's what's happening at the moment in my country. And people are divided. You know, the society are divided. And the worst that you can do is encourage that division by being in power and trying to separate and separate. And that's what's happening. And yes, I am quite concerned. I think that to open a dialogue, you have to put a lot of those things to the side in order to move forward. And it's very difficult because I do understand why people are very angry at how the country has been governed over the last decades, and they wanted to change, but not necessarily change is for better. It can be for worse, you know. So you need to make sure that you're informed, and that is a difficulty now because there's a lot of misinformation going around. So yes, I think it's important that we read, that we know what's happening and compare, you know, what we're reading, the press, not only read from one paper, but to have many and and see what really, you know, untangle what the powers behind it. So yes, it is a concern, but then again, it's everywhere. Everywhere.
No, I mean, I tend to give students, you know, lots of hope, you know, even like asking them, you know, you don't have to be like too moral about things, you know, just simple morality. The simple morality is, you know, things you don't want to see in your own life, in your own, you know, body. How will you accept those things to the other people, you know? So if it is not good for you, I mean, why do you think that that's good for the other people? So if, like, you know, if someone wants to deport you, will you accept that?
Yeah.
Will that be good for you? but why do you think that it's good for the other people? Just deport them. so that universal understanding about, like, what does it mean to the other people?
Yeah. And to me, that's civil responsibility. And I don't think that's taught as a subject here in primary or high schools, and I remember it being taught to us as a subject where they incorporated a lot of legal aspects to, the rights and the obligations that we had as citizens, and yes, the moral aspect of human rights, and I think that is very important. And I think that could be something that can be implemented in education, in the curriculum. I think a lot may come out of, a lack of awareness. And I can see it, and that's one of the things that also happened in the pandemic. The fact that at least myself, I conducted myself throughout thinking that it was my civil responsibility to stick to, the restrictions, because it's a common good. And it's not just me, it's for everybody else. And it's the morality of it. Regardless of the consequences that it may have, in your health and the health of others, but it's just a matter of civil responsibility.
Because we both, we both fight for lots of good causes, And I think one thing I found in my own struggle that if you challenge the power doesn't have any answer. We feel that power has got power and then, they will destroy us. It's not true. It's not true. The amount of, like challenge I did in my, even academia. I found it really, like empowering for myself that, oh my God, these people are really coward.
Well, yes, and at the same time, it could be quite abstract, I think, for example, and I've been very fortunate to, in the recent years, to move towards other areas and what I do, and I have met very inspirational people that fight for the rights, for example, of older persons. And I have a project with that and colleagues in Uruguay. And we did a 2-page comic whilst we were in the midst of the pandemic. And it was precisely that, trying to make people aware that older persons have the same human rights as everybody else. And because at the beginning, do you remember how awful it was for older people? And it still is. But it was like the last drop in the I forgot the saying in English, but the last drop, yes, that is the last drop. There had been many inhumanities happened before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, it just was so visible to all, for all to see. The fact that they gave in hospitals when they didn't have enough ventilators. I'm talking about the beginning. And doctors were in overwhelmed and said, and having to choose who's going to get it. And there was that decision of giving it to the younger person. which is infringing in human rights for older people. And but that has happened before, the pandemic. And to me, it was very important to make a point and to show it and showcase it. Look, we have a duty, towards older people. And so that was a very interesting project. And later on, we moved. Our idea was to do something much bigger, and we managed to do it later. Even within the pandemic, and we now have a publication that it's in English, Spanish, and it's at this moment being translated into Portuguese, to highlight the Convention for Human Rights for Older Persons in the Americas. So yes, I mean, those are the things that move me, and I think even if it's a little grain of sand, but those are the projects that move me, and I think it's important that we stand for.
So, like, I really want to touch some of the things, like your life's trajectory, so, like, when did you decide, or like, is there any kind of light bulb moment that, you thought that you want to be a teacher?
Well, that's a good question. When I was a little girl, my dad remembers that I used to say that I wanted to teach English. And that was because I was very fond of my English teacher. So he said that when I was 5, I said that when I was a grown up, I was going to be an English teacher. And which it was really funny, because look where I am now. And not an English teacher, Spanish. But my first degree is law, and that's what I wanted to do as a youngster. And actually, what I wanted to do is, and I did study a postgrad in environmental law.
Okay.
It was important. And think about the 90s. Yeah. Think about Mexico City. We need it, to look after the environment. So that was a big issue for me, and that's what I wanted to do, because I did in the last 2 years of my degree, last year in my degree, I specialized in criminal law, maybe following my dad's steps. I don't know. That had something to do with it. But I think after having the opportunity to work in that area in Mexico City, I thought, this is not for me. Criminal law was just maybe something that I wasn't going to enjoy for the rest of my life. So the beauty of studying law is the fact that you have a wide scope. You can do so many things with it. And that's when I wanted to do environmental law. But then life takes you where it takes you, and it brought me here. And at the time, working as a lawyer here was not an option, because I would have had to retrain. I had small children at the time, and then there was an opportunity for me to teach Spanish, and I thought, well, why not? And that's how it started. I didn't know I was going to enjoy it. I loved it. I didn't know. If I am completely honest, I didn't know. And both my parents, my mom in her area of nursing, she did at some point in her career taught, administration and how administration of hospitals, which she's very good at. Very organized woman, my mom is. And my dad also, he taught in a few universities law in Mexico. So yeah, but I never thought of myself doing that. but that's where life took me, and I really enjoyed it. I think just being in front of all this thirsty minds for for knowledge is very exciting. Yes, I when I started, I really liked it, and then I trained for that too, because I thought this is what I'm going to do. So I did a master in teaching modern languages. So yeah, and that's where it has taken me. But now I am going full circle, and that's why my projects now, at some respect, have to do with law, with those things that I had at the beginning of my studying years.
No, that's amazing story. I mean, I'm just like trying to see, like, this. So obviously you're from Mexico, you're born in Mexico, and then you became a Spanish teacher. So the Spanish language you teach and your mother tongue, how close they are?
Oh, we speak Spanish. Spanish is a universal, it's a global language. Now, there are differences. Of course, there are differences. And you have to think about it because of historical reasons, because of geographical reasons, so many things that I hear about the Spanish spoken in the peninsula, I had to learn vocabulary, for example. In Spain they call things different to Mexico, but that is the same language. It is the same language. But I think that gives so much to the classroom, because I have that background. I cannot only speak from one place, but I can bring a whole new world to the classroom. And I think that is diversity in the classroom, and I bring it to it, which I think it's is for the students' benefit. It is the pronunciation, yes, the pronunciation of the letter C, that in Spanish is F, and in Mexico it's C. So, and yes, there are so many things, but the language is the language. And I mostly teach grammar. So grammar is grammar here and Equatorial Guinea, where they also speak Spanish.
Give us a bit of, I'm not expert on like North America or like South America. So like, if you talk about the numbers, I mean, how many people we are talking about this speak Spanish in like North America?
Okay. Let's start with geography, because this is something that I always tell my students when I see here that people mistake Mexico for being in another part of the Americas, and Mexico is part of North America, as you know, Abdullah, and I have so much I spend a lot of time trying to say, no, we are. How can you say that we're in South America? We're in North America. How did you move the whole country? You moved away from Central America right down. How did that happen? So yes, let's say it. In Spain, there are about 46 million people. And in the US, I'm not even talking about a country whose Spanish is the official language, but in the US, we have 44 million people speaking Spanish. We are talking about the population in Mexico, about 110 million people. I might got wrong that number, but it's over 100 million people. And so and that's just North America. So how does that compare? I always say that we're a minority.
Because, I mean, because of the way the demography is changing, especially in the whole North
But in
America.
the US, I was surprised as part of what I did for the university a few years back, recruitment. I used to travel to the US, and I was very surprised to find that Spanish was so widespread. Yeah, I mean, I knew that in Chicago there was a big Hispanic community. I knew that, but Minnesota, Wisconsin, everywhere I went, in Boston, Spanish was so widespread. And to me, it was a pleasant surprise. It was really good, and lots of Mexican food everywhere. Good Mexican food. So that was important, of course. But yeah, Spanish is and at the moment, for example, China is trying to push for Spanish to be one of the most important languages. Obviously, for economical reasons, because they know that the market that they found in Hispanoamerica is huge. So that's the objective, Well, they're everywhere, but that's the reason for Spanish to be so important now, even in China. So yes, but saying that, the sad part of the story there is that in countries like Mexico, it has taken centuries to acknowledge the importance of indigenous languages, and that's a sad story. That Spanish has prevailed, and for historical reasons too, because who won the independence movements, or and who stayed in power, and etc. But yes, there's a marginalization of the indigenous population in my country and in many countries in Hispanic America. And it's only now, very recent, where there are a big, there are movements that are pushing through and forward the indigenous languages. And that's why I was telling you about me trying to learn my dad's indigenous language. Because I think it's very important, because you are losing more than a language. You're losing a culture, a way of living, a way to see the world. And knowledge and science and art, so many other things that you can get from those indigenous cultures that is going to be lost if we don't do something about it. So yes, it's very important, I think.
I mean, I'm just like, because you are linguist. I mean, we use lots of terminology, so just want to make sure that we understand all those terms. So we mentioned about Hispanic, Latinos, Latinas. Can you just give us some idea, how these things work?
Okay. Hispanic America is those countries that speak Spanish, because Latin America it also encompasses, for example, Brazil, that speaks Portuguese, that come from the Latin. It's a Romance language. So it is a wider scope. But for me, when I said Hispanic America, is just those countries that were under Spanish rule that speak Spanish, and that was the case of my country. But and that's why, for example, when I was telling you about this convention in the Americas, obviously English because of Canada and US, but mainly, but also you have countries that speak Spanish and countries that speak Portuguese, and that's why it's important for us to spread the word in all those countries. But yes, it's to do with who was there and where, because I mean the border, the south border of Mexico is Belize and Guatemala. Guatemala is a Spanish-speaking country, but Belize is an English-speaking country. And where, by the way, you can buy a really cold Guinness there. because you know, of the British rule. And so yes, it's a very interesting continent to study about its history and intricacies along the last few centuries. But the story that was there before, that we mustn't forget, you know, and that we have to make sure that we recover. I was telling the other day students that the way that pre-Hispanic cultures, for example, the Maya, the Aztec, they used to they documented their history, and there's codexes that were made of a paper that was made of tree bark, and they had hieroglyphic language and you know, pictures, and all these codexes were destroyed. Not all of them, but most of them were destroyed when the conquest happened. For example, one of the ones that that is very well kept is in the Vatican. And for us to go and call the Florentine Codex, and for us to learn about our history, we have to go there to find it, you know. But I think that's very important, that we make sure that we re-look at our own history, and we are the tellers of our own history.
Because, I mean, that's quite interesting, because I mean, when I do stuff on like post-colonial history, it looks like, you know, so when you use this term like Hispanic or Latinas, you know, this kind of thing, it looks like, you know, your story started in the, like, you know, 17th century rather than, you know, the golden age. And so all those like thousands of years. So it's a kind of almost like dehumanize the whole.
Yeah, that's why that memory of my childhood of celebrating the arrival of Christopher Columbus to the continent is now, what were we doing?
So that's, do you see, like, I mean, what it did, I mean, it gave this very powerful knowledge that, you know, your story started from Columbus. You know, you don't need to worry about, you know, the past.
No.
So if you tell this story, the powerful story started from Columbus, that means, no, you'll be okay with this story rather than the actual story.
So I think it's very important, and it's very important to spell it out in this context, in this continent. You know, I think it's very important that we do, and we speak about those things, and speak about what our ancestors believe, and the creation of the world, and how they use poetry and to describe that, and you know, it's just so vast and so rich, and the knowledge about astronomy, you know, they were much more advanced than the Europeans. So and it was just based on observation, and there are so many things that we the knowledge they had in medical advances, you know, and I am very thankful for those that are researchers that are doing that job, you know, to that knowledge and share it.
I mean, especially if you look at the American politics, the way they use these terms, Hispanic, Latinos, and all those things, it's very casual way.
Yeah, it's very
Very
casual.
casual,
It's very casual. And I know. And don't get me started with gastronomy. I have that conversation too many times, too many. When I said that's not a tortilla, that's a flour tortilla. A maize tortilla is a maize tortilla, and that's a tortilla. So yes, it is. But it's another cultural appropriation I can think of is the 5th of May, that in the States is a huge party. And I remember having a conversation with a student here that said to me, a Spanish student, that said to me, oh, we should organize something for the 5th of May. And I say, do you know what Mexicans celebrated the 5th of May? And he said, the independence? And I said, no, that's the 16th of September. And I said, the 5th of May was one of the only battles that the Mexican army won against foreign invader, and that was against the French. So I don't think my French colleagues would be very happy if I start celebrating the 5th of May here. We didn't win the war, just the battle.
Yeah. That's quite funny too, like how that the terminology changes in terms of your geographic location. So like for Europe, the crusade is a big thing, but for the Middle Eastern people, crusade is just an invasion.
Yeah, because
invasion.
Yes, you have to be, and that's intercultural awareness, to be aware of your own background, but also the other, and from the other, you learn about your own too, and that's why, I mean, maybe that's why I like teaching languages so much, because of that aspect, the intercultural awareness that it's embedded in the teaching of languages, and the learning about the other, yourself through the eyes of the other. So I think that is very important. I quite enjoy that.
More or less, we cover lots of things. You're teaching, or I think that was really good. So we talked about our politics as well. I really want to cover, a bit of pandemic, how it affected your life, your understanding about,
Yes, I think it had to do. I think my life through the pandemic, like anybody else's, was turned upside down. Personally, one of the things I struggled with was the fact that I am a very social person. And I really miss that, and even now, I'm quite, I like to hug my friends, and that was something that I still miss. But it's about acceptance, and I think I've been quite good about that, accepting that that's how things are now. But it's not easy to come to that point. I also struggle with the fact that I haven't been able to travel back to Mexico and see my parents. And I don't think I will be able to go anytime soon, because things are not handled properly in my country. So, and I don't want to put myself at risk and others. So, yes, it's been, you adapt. It's like coming here and moving to a different country, speaking another language. You have to learn to adapt to and take the best out of the situation. One of the things that I did is I did a lot of reading, which I instead of going out, that's what I was doing. and I discover many other authors that I hadn't read before, so that was good. I also podcast about history that I loved, and I know when they're coming out, and I listened for them. A lot of Mexican history. I've been very fortunate and that I had the time to listen to, and also fortunately I had a space, a garden where I could be, and that was good. So overall, I think I consider myself very fortunate that I had a job. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my life. I did. Some loved ones, yes, have lost their life through the pandemic, but in many ways, I have to be thankful that I am in a privileged position, and it was, here where I stay, my neighbors is set up a chat, a WhatsApp chat. So it was very, very handy. It was really good. At the beginning, are you going to the shop? And we would, take turns and things. So that was very useful. And that sense of community, I think that was something very positive. Also, I discovered something that I didn't know I liked, and that's making puzzles, jigsaw puzzles. So it's a really good way to meditate, in my opinion.
Oh my God.
I do. I finished 2 weeks ago a Nelson Mandela one, a 1,000-piece one, but unfortunately it's not 1,000 pieces, it's a 999 piece because I lost one. So I'm still in search for it, and it has to be somewhere. And so that was quite good. It was very therapeutic because it was like meditating. You get you go to another world, and your concentration, it's in finding the peace and how you fit that piece. How it fits. So that I like it very much.
Can I just ask quickly, once you have done that puzzle, then what would you do?
I make sure that the ones that I am doing, I like them enough to frame them and put them in the wall. So I have a wall of the pandemic wall.
That's very good. That's very good.
I have a really nice painting of Diego Rivera. I have one of Mexican skulls. I have another one of Frida Kahlo that my son gave me, and best birthday present ever. And the Nelson Mandela I'm hoping to put in my office when time allows. And the other one, I'm doing just now a Frida Kahlo one, another one. Yes. I know that some people undo them and put them back in a box. I don't know why, because you spent so many hours putting it together.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? I would play it.
If I finish it, I don't want to do it again. No.
Never the same either. So no. I like to display them. That's why I was very careful when I got one to make sure that I was going to like it enough to put it on the wall.
I think that might be a good idea if you send me some pictures so that I can add this.
Yes, I will send you. Yeah, I'll send you the pictures.
And also, the things where did you buy those jigsaw thing? I mean,
I ordered them online.
Okay, because these are more specialized. You are asking for Nelson Mandela.
Your research, for example, I don't know where my son got the Frida Kahlo one. That was a really good one. I like the texture, because the one that the Nelson Mandela is a wooden one.
Okay.
So it's very nice. It's very nice. The one I'm doing just now, it's cardboard, the Frida Kahlo one. But the wooden one are different. It's different texture. It's very interesting for those. Obviously, I am a complete beginner. I know that people that do it seriously have years and years of making jigsaws, but I'm a beginner, but I like it.
So you kind of mentioned about this like artist Frida. How big she is in like Mexico, in today's Mexico?
Look, she had a very interesting life. She's big. I mean, her house is a museum. It's the Blue House, and I remember going there as a child. And now every time that I take people to Mexico, I take them to that museum that is her house. And yes, big artist, not the only one. There are other artists in Mexico, but I think part of her visibility internationally came with who she was married to. That was Diego Rivera, and the controversial points, views of Rivera, and especially in the sense of what he did when they both went to the US. And I also like Rivera very much. I love his murals in Mexico City in the National Palace. I remember taking my children there and saying, you want to learn Mexican history? Look. So it takes you through the stages of Mexican history. So, but yeah, Kahlo was someone that outspoken.
Because she's very political in her.
And political.
I remember because she was linked with Trotsky from.
Exactly. Oh, Trotsky is another museum you should visit in Mexico City.
That's the plan.
Yeah, that's his house, and you can see the typewriter he used when he lived there.
Oh my God.
And also the murder weapon. So because he was killed in Mexico, and there was an attempt on his life when he was staying at Frida's and Diego Rivera's house. So yes, but all those places are still there for you to visit and learn of that time in Mexico. So yes, she was very political and very outspoken, and yes, for a woman at that time, it was unheard of. No.
No, it's just like one of those iconic, artists.
Exactly.
Because I'm from very left politics. No, she's very, very, important to me, and her relationship with Trotsky and all these people.
Yes.
As we are talking about, this is a very turbulent time, and
Of course, it was, and how he had to flee, and he ended in Mexico, of all places. It's amazing, and that's part of our own history.
Yeah. But also it showed, like how progressive the Mexican society was during that time.
Yeah. So for you to be Mexican and known that man was there, and the influence that he had so far away from what Mexico is, and that's another thing. When you're grown up, you never imagine you're going to visit all those places that you hear about, because they seem so far away. But it's great. I think that's why in education you have to embed all this different points of view, cultures in children. So they have that thirst for knowing more, and when they grow there, hopefully to visit those places.
I mean, okay, here is the plan. I mean, I will visit Mexico with you.
But, you know, I'm going to need a bus because there's so many colleagues also that want, and I think we should do that at retirement. We should get the Mexican Mayra's bus and take them around. We can start in Mexico City.
Yeah, this should be like guided tour, you know, because you know so much.
Yes, I like the idea, Abdullah. Why not?
Good.
I really like that.
So like one of the last thing I want to ask my colleagues, for the future student, you know, what will be your advice who are coming to, you know, study language or this kind of area?
I think, as I mentioned just a few minutes back, is to be thirsty for knowledge, you know, and be fully aware that everything that you learn, it's good in the sense of you're investing in your future. The fact that, for example, I studied something that I am away from in a way, enabled me and gave me the tools to be where I am now. And it gave me a wider understanding of the world, and it gave me options. And anything as little as you can see. For example, when I was in high school and I had a very good grammar teacher. I mean, if I hadn't paid attention then, I would struggle with what I do now, you know? So it was an investment. See it as an investment, because you don't know what the future has prepared for you, or what your future is going to be like. So anything is an investment, and just give it all. That's what I would say.
Good. Mayra, I mean, it's an absolute pleasure today. No, I was planning to talk to you for some time, and I thought we had a fantastic time. But I mean, I think a couple of other things I will do, like, you know, I will bring you back and talk about, you know, because I'm more interested in that, you know, this like the cultural side of your story, you know, your background.
Yes.
Because we don't find those people, you know, to talk about those things, you know. Because I mean, the way we see Mexico, just, you know, Mexico is just today's Mexico, but Mexico has got a
and so much more
things, you know.
Yes, has so much more to offer.
So like Mexico is like linked with like drugs and, you know, all those like narco.
Unfortunately.
But it has got political history as well, like why these things happen, you know. So we'll try to unpack some of those, you know, those things. and also because I mean, obviously your father was, you know, in a kind of job where he had to face some of those things, and then, you know, perhaps he brought some of the stories from his workplace to his family.
Oh yeah.
So those things would be very, very fascinating to know.
Those stories.
So,
but no, thank you so much, Abdullah, and thank you for inviting me. I had a great time being your guest.
Thank you. But we'll go to Mexico together.
Yes, that's a plan. We have the retirement bus straight to Mexico.
Good. Okay.
See you later. Bye, Abdullah. Thank you.